Hey, all, today we're going to continue our discussion on sampling, and today we are going to talk about how to sample badly. Of course, we don't want to intentionally sample badly, but these are some things that can introduce bias and sort of poison your results and invalidate results that you would get from sampling. So we want to avoid these pitfalls. We want to use good sampling methods. And so we're going to talk about some things that could go wrong that you want to avoid. And the first one is a scenario where you have a voluntary response. And so you get a voluntary response when you are not intentionally sampling individuals and you are just asking for opinions. The biggest one is a Twitter poll or some sort of online poll where you have to seek out the survey, you have to seek these things out to respond. And so what's going to happen is you're only going to get certain people to respond to your poll, and it's not necessarily going to be representative of the entire population you want to find out about. So if somebody asks a Twitter poll about my favorite team, Arsenal, uh, the only people who are going to respond are, of course, people who follow those accounts, uh, people who feel strongly one way or another about the question. It's not going to be a representative sample of the entire fan base, which is probably what you were trying to find something out about. Another bad sampling method that you probably have observed if you've gone to a mall at any point is a convenience sample. A lot of times at malls, people will stand around with clipboards and they'll ask you if you have a minute to take a survey. And so no random sampling is being done there. They are just simply asking people as they walk by in the mall and hoping that somebody will answer their survey. And so without having any randomness, we're not getting a representative sample of the entire population. So in that case, it would probably be people who come to that mall. And what issue I can think of is that there are different stores in different parts of the mall, and so you're only getting a sample of the people who want to shop in those certain stores that you're standing by. And so that would be a bad way to sample. That would be like asking people as they walked into the cafeteria for questions about the school without having any sort of plan in place to get a random sample. Another way is to have a bad sampling frame. Sampling frame is the people you have to draw from when you are taking your sample. And sometimes when we want information, there are people who we have not considered in our sampling frame. So the examples here are people who may be incarcerated, homeless, people who are students who we don't have contact information for. So let's say we want some information about population of Prince William County. There are people living in Prince William County who may not have an address, and so we might not be able to send them a survey. Um, there are people in Prince William County who maybe don't have a driver's license quite yet, even though they could, and so we'll miss them. People who have been incarcerated for a short or a long or a medium time. Those people will not be able to be reached. We will not have considered them in part of our sampling, and so we might have some bias there. Some of these are similar, which is why I have these sort of like red quotes. So the bad sampling frame is that we haven't considered the people. Undercoverage is we have not been able to reach out to certain people. And so we want to make sure that when we're doing our surveys, when we're trying to reach out to people, that we're doing it at an appropriate time. So you might get telephone calls, spam calls, where people are trying to poll you about certain things, and we might not end up reaching people because of the time of day we call them, or other reasons like that. People who we can't reach might have a similar character trait, something in common that might be important to our data collection, but we won't be able to reach those types of people for this reason. And then we might have a non-response bias. It's very similar to undercoverage. It's very easy to get these confused, but undercoverage is we couldn't reach you. Non-response is you reached me and I just don't want to participate. I get an email with a survey from the county and I decide I really just don't want to participate. So they reached me. They were able to get me the survey, but maybe I just didn't feel like doing it. And so we can't always control for that, but that is a potential source of bias in our data. Maybe there is something about the individual that would mean make them not want to respond, and we would want that type of person to have responded. Again, a lot of these are kind of similar, so it takes some time. We have a non-response bias where people decide not to respond, and then we have this thing called a response bias. These people are responding, but there's something bad about the way we ask a question or the way we word a question or perhaps like the tone in which we ask a question or in some cases who's asking the question. So I might ask a question of a student and they might feel like they have to answer in a certain way because I'm their teacher. So this would create what's called a response bias, where we're influencing in some way the person's response, whether we've worded a question in a way that makes them want to answer, or they're being asked by somebody who has some position of authority, which makes them want to respond in a certain way. And that's why a lot of times surveys will be anonymous so that you answer honestly. Uh, but we could ask a question about smoking. This is a good example, I think, uh, where I could phrase my question: do you think smoking is a good thing? And that would be a pretty good question. But if I asked, given the fact that smoking is known to cause cancer and people die from it, do you think smoking is a good thing? And so I've sort of influenced the person responding by giving them information about how this thing could be bad. And so their mind is going to go towards, no, smoking is bad. They still might answer yes, but I have done something to try and influence their answer, and that would be bad because we're not getting an honest response. And so that will introduce bias. So a bunch of different ways that we can introduce bias into a sample that would create a sample that is not so good. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. These will take some time to get a hold of, just like the sampling methods. So practice is important here. Asking questions is important here, as always. Please do stick around for the problems at the end, and take your time, and good luck.